Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Brandon. Welcome back to Marotta Media. In today's review, I will be giving my thoughts on the 10th main installment in the Fast and Furious franchise, Fast X. As I stated, this is the 10th, or I guess technically 11th movie in the Fast and Furious saga, if you include Hobbs and Shaw. And I don't really know how to describe the plot of this movie. It's basically the same as all the other ones, though. The Toretto clan goes on a mission, and a villain shows up, and they drive cars, and some ridiculous action happens. Things blow up, and yeah, that's about it. If you've seen any Fast and Furious movie, then you have seen this one, believe me. But this is the sequel to F9 from 2021, and if you guys have been watching my channel for a while, you will know that F9 was on my worst of the year list in 2021. But I made a full review on that movie. If you're curious to hear my thoughts, go check it out. I'll link it down below. But the basic overall problem with F9 is that it was a movie that was just so over the top that it felt like a parody of itself. So going into Fast X, I did not have the highest of expectations, if any at all. All I was hoping for was just that this movie would be better than F9. And evidently that was too much to ask for, because Fast X is much, much worse than F9, and I am very comfortable in my belief of that. Now, I will start with my problems with something that I know for certain that every fanboy of this franchise will disagree with. Fast X has a terrible script. Because every time I have criticized a script for one of these movies or movies like this, the main rebuttal I always get is, "Aw, dude, it's not meant to be Oscar-worthy. It's just supposed to be fun." And yes, I know that. I know these movies are supposed to be fun. I'm not going into them expecting the most thought-provoking questions that I've ever heard in a film before. But the dialogue, much like the rest of the franchise, just continues to be so awful and cringeworthy. And not only that, but this movie's script treats its audience as if they are just a bunch of idiots and they have no clue what they are watching. Because a lot of the dialogue is so exposition heavy and it just literally explains what's happening to the audience. It reminds me a lot of the dialogue that you would see in a Neil Breen movie.
Now that we've paid off our fellow elected representatives in the legislature, that environmental solar panel development bill will fail next week.
Not to mention the cash it'll put in our pockets.
That might be a very niche reference that only a few people will understand, but my friend said that to me while we were watching this movie, and I don't think he could be more spot on. But like I said, everyone's comeback is always that these movies aren't meant to be written well, which I think is such a weird argument. But they always say the action is what they go for. And to tell you the truth, I think the action in the entire Fast and Furious saga has just become so ridiculously over the top and bombastic that it's become stale. I don't know if that'll make sense to people, but I feel like the entire franchise has just reached the peak of its absurdity. I truly don't think there's anywhere else that this franchise could go that'll make the action feel fresh and surprising again. Now, I may be totally wrong on that. I may absolutely eat my words when the next movie comes out, but as of right now, that is how I feel. Just to me, it's truly reached its ceiling, so I'm not sure what else they can do that can be considered shocking. Because I think that we reached the peak of absurdity in F9 when the crew went to space. When you go to space, honestly, I feel like you've reached your limit. Like, what else can you do? But the action in Fast X is not as constant as it was in F9. But at the same time, when it is happening, it just drags on for so long, and it becomes rather boring, if I'm being honest with you. But most of the action sequences in Fast X occur through these pointless hand-to-hand fights. There are a lot of characters that fight each other just in hand-to-hand combat, and most of the time you just sit there wondering, why are these people fighting in the first place? There is one fight in particular between the characters of Letty and Cypher, played by Michelle Rodriguez and Charlize Theron. Honestly, they just fight for absolutely no reason, and then when the fight ended, I was like, what was the point of that? Like, what were they fighting for? The hand-to-hand fights are also so poorly edited, but it's not just the editing and the action sequences that's bad. The editing as a whole is so fucking terrible. And the reason for that is because it's so jumpy, and I mean that literally. This movie contains so many jumps from place to place that it becomes so jarring and disorienting. We're constantly moving around from location to location. It just shifts between countries. One minute we're in LA, then the next minute we're in Rome, then we're in London, then we're in Rio de Janeiro, then we're in Portugal, and then at one point, the gang finds themselves in fucking Antarctica. I criticized the Fast and Furious franchise for this before, but this movie has absolutely no stakes. And what I mean by stakes is that you never feel like any of these characters are in danger at any point. Even though they've experienced some of the most dangerous situations that a human being could experience, you know that they're gonna live through it. They even touch on this in F9. They try to act self-aware, like, oh, guys, we've been through so much stuff together. We might actually be superheroes. And honestly, it wouldn't shock me if they just ripped off their clothes in the next movie and they've got capes underneath there and then they fly away. Like I said, I don't know where this franchise can go that would honestly shock me anymore. But yeah, you just know none of them are going to die in these situations. I truly wish that this franchise had the balls to kill off one of its main characters. But it's been perfectly established that characters who did die on camera just miraculously survived somehow. I mean, that was evident when Han came back in F9. And also, like previous Fast and Furious movies, the tones are constantly at odds with one another. Another one of my main criticisms of Fast and Furious has been that these movies take themselves way too seriously. It tries way too hard to be funny, but that just doesn't work when there are so many scenes that come off like they are meant to be taken so seriously. This franchise has always taken itself way too seriously, and I've just never understood that. They've obviously gone so far into absurdity, so I guess why don't you just fully embrace that at this point? Why even try having serious moments anymore? It just doesn't mesh with the over-the-top action that is constantly occurring. And there is a moment in this movie where I actually experience that emotion, and I will get to that later on. But Fast X also delves deeper into its absurdity and its silliness with the performance of Jason Momoa. Jason Momoa plays a character named Dante, and he is this movie's main antagonist. And Dante is, let's say, very animated and wacky. He comes off like a cartoon villain most of the time. And it seems like the general consensus of people are truly loving his performance, and I completely understand why. But I don't know, his performance just didn't work for me. I found it a little too silly, even for Fast and Furious. I just found his performance to be a little too reminiscent of someone like the Joker. So when you're trying to emulate a character as iconic as the Joker in something as silly as Fast and Furious, it just doesn't really work for me. That being said, I do fully understand why people liked his performance as much as they did. I will give him one thing though, he's pretty much the only actor in this movie trying. Everybody else just comes off like they're there for a paycheck. Especially Brie Larson, Vin Diesel, and Charlize Theron. It seems like most, if not the entire cast, are just completely phoning in their performances. And I guess that's due to the fact that a lot of these people are not good actors at all. I'm sorry, but Vin Diesel is truly the worst actor working today, and I mean that. Fast X also has its fair share of scenes that I just found very strange. It's not the action scenes per se, but just these scenes that are so strange and out there that they made me audibly say out loud, "What?" One scene in particular where we cut back to Rio de Janeiro and we see Jason Momoa's Dante painting the toenails of these two dead soldiers. And he's talking to them as if they're alive, and he's acting like they're alive because he has their eyes taped open. And he's just laughing and giggling with them, and it just came off as so weird. I think this was supposed to showcase how insane he is as a villain, but like I said, it just came off as strange to me more than anything. There's also another scene where Han and Shaw are fighting each other. And then somehow in the midst of the fight, this body bag shows up on the floor, and a conscious man unzips the body bag and climbs out of it. He's wearing nothing but his underwear, and then he runs away screaming. You could definitely tell this was meant to be a humorous moment, but I can tell you for certain that most people in my audience were very confused by this. There were some scattered laughs here and there, but like the rest of the audience, I was confused more than anything. And like I said, this movie tries way too hard to be funny, and it's just not funny at all. The humor is just so forced, it never comes off naturally. That might be due to the fact that none of these actors have any chemistry with one another despite working with each other for nearly 20 years. But the only times that I truly laughed were at moments that weren't meant to be funny. Take the opening scene, for example. We see Dom's car doing donuts and burnouts in a parking lot. And then the car stops and the passenger door opens and you see Dom exiting the car from the passenger side and he goes around to the driver's side. And the camera is at a high angle, and as it starts to come down, it's revealed that Dom's son is driving the car. And this kid is like 9 years old, and from the angle they shot it at, it looks like he can't even see over the dash. You could tell this was meant to be kind of sweet, but it just came off so funny and stupid. And like I said earlier, there was one scene in particular that was meant to be very dramatic and emotional, but my friend and I were laughing out loud. It is a spoiler, so I won't say anything specifically, but it involves a character making kind of a big decision in terms of their life. And this was meant to be a moment that was supposed to be a tearjerker for the audience, but dude, it was so unbelievably funny. If there's anything good I can say about this movie is, like I said, Jason Momoa's performance. Even though I wasn't the biggest fan of his performance, I could tell that the dude is trying and having a blast playing this character, so I can't fault him for that. And something else they touch on that I can't remember the last time they touched on, if ever, was the gang actually facing consequences for their actions. Because something else that happens, without getting into spoilers, is kind of this big thing and it causes irreparable damage to an area. And the Toretto clan is basically seen as terrorists and fugitives on the run from the law. But this also opens up a huge plot hole in this movie because authorities are actively looking for them, but at no point do they ever make an attempt to hide or anything. You guys are on the run, you are seen as terrorists, and they never once attempt to lay low. They go out in public, they go on planes, they drive cars, they get in more fights. These people are just fearless, I guess. But yeah, if you couldn't tell, I did not like this movie at all. This franchise just isn't really my favorite thing in the world. If it's your favorite, then good for you. I'm glad that you enjoy it, because I certainly wish I did. I guess I just yearn for the early days of this franchise where it was mostly just about cars and street racing. But they've gone so far off the deep end that I don't think there's any coming back from it. And this movie ends on a cliffhanger because this is supposed to be one of 3 that will supposedly end the Fast and Furious franchise, but I don't believe for a second that is what will happen. But yeah, this movie sucks. It's terrible. It's much worse than F9. Overall, I would give Fast X a 2 out of 10. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching my review of Fast X. If you guys saw this movie, let me know what you thought about it. Did you love it? Did you hate it? And where would you rank it among the other Fast and Furious movies? If you guys like this review, be sure to hit that thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe. If you want to see my previous reviews, including my review of F9 from a few years ago, I will link those right over here. Other than that, I hope you all have a tremendous rest of your day. I will see you all next time.